Why do and have so many Brits joined ISIS?
We've seen increased radicalization within the United Kingdom. Much of this, I'm afraid to say, is a self-inflicted wound. We've had 4 decades of state-sponsored multiculturalism. We've actually encouraged people not to come together and to be British, but to live separately, to live apart. We even had
kind of like what we're doing here.
Yes. No, there are similarities. We even had the last Archbishop of Canterbury suggesting that Sharia law would be acceptable in British cities. So I'm afraid we have been weak, and we have not been muscular in standing up and saying to people, we are a Christian country. We have a Christian constitution, a Judeo-Christian culture.
All right, I want you to think about what UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage was saying, not only because he's a big deal in Britain, but many argue he could very well be Britain's next prime minister, warning, as he has for years now, about very generous, open, porous borders that allow any and all to enter and take away a country's character, because then you get multiculturalism rampant, which in and of itself isn't bad, as long as those various cultures, like in our country originally, all cede to the same point and honor the same country and the same commitments. That is not happening in Britain, according to Mr. Farage. Is there a risk of it happening here in the same way? To Steve Moore on that. Steve, what do you think?
You know, we're different from Europe. We're different from Britain. We have a melting pot culture in the United States that has worked really well. We've been able to assimilate immigrants better than any other country in the history of the world.
But it's out of control.
Here, I would say this. If the president starts legalizing a lot of these illegal immigrants, there's going to be such a backlash against that that any hope of immigration reform is dead. So I sincerely hope the president doesn't do that. When it comes to the threats of terrorism at the border, and look, we're all concerned about terrorists getting into the country and blowing up a school or a building. You know, my feeling is there's a big difference between a terrorist and a Mexican migrant worker who wants to work, you know, on the farms.
What do you think of what he was saying about the fact that as a Judeo-Christian nation, we've lost focus of that? No less than Martin Luther King's niece was here just yesterday with me, arguing that's a problem. She was worried that it's a worldwide problem. She wasn't just blaming the president, but this idea to back away from basic Christian values, Judeo-Christian values in the aggregate, and we're losing kind of our global soul, which is something I believe Mr. Farage was getting.
It's an issue, and if you look at what's happened, but it's a much bigger issue, Neil, in Europe, in England, in France, for example, than it is here in the United States, where such a deluge of those immigrants coming into those countries are Muslim. We have the advantage. We really are a true melting pot. We're getting Asians and Hispanics and Europeans, and that's, I still think that's something.
Well, he did say that bred the better than 1,000 Britons who we're told are now joined ISIS and either fighting over there, in Syria, God knows where else, and that it's helped bred this type of behavior. What did you make of that?
I think he's exactly right. I think, and this is a very dangerous situation, and because you get kind of the terrorist organizations that are being fertilized in these countries, and that's a very worrisome thing. But again, there's a big difference between immigrants who want to come into a country and work and get ahead.
Well, it's like anything. Most people are good people. Most immigrants are good people.
Look, we have to be selective. We have to. This is the reason, Neil, people are so concerned when they see the porous border, because how do we know who we're letting in? How do we know whether this person is coming in as a criminal or a terrorist or, you know, a member of some kind of organization?
But I think Farage is saying something bigger, that we're losing a sense of our values. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't believe that. Look, I think America, we've had, you know, millions of immigrants come into this country, and I don't think we're losing our values as Americans. I mean, I actually have a feeling.
But if we grant amnesty to potentially millions.
But see, you and I agree on this. Right. A blanket amnesty is a disaster. It actually undermines public support for immigration. And Americans know, the people we know that are immigrants are upset.
You're saying Farage is not speaking of America as much as he's speaking for the unique situation.
I definitely believe that to be true. And that's an advantage we have over Europe and England, because we have an assimilation culture that doesn't work nearly as well as it does in Europe and the UK. But if we don't secure the border, my big concern is that the historical support for immigration in this country will melt down.
Good point. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for changing gears with us so fast. Steve Moore is the best. In the meantime, pay attention, kids. And I don't care if you're only 5 years old. Listen up and count them up. Crayons, check. Coloring book, check. Cell phone, well, better have mom and dad cut a check. What?